Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Investor Frame podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sparks. And on this show, we ask successful real estate investors and entrepreneurs to share their stories so we can all learn from their experiences and get closer to the things that we want in life. Today, I have a fantastic guest, David Richter. David is the owner and founder of Simple CFO Solutions. He is an author of the book Profit First for Real Estate Investing, and he's an active real estate investor. He's done this himself for a very long time. Now he spends a lot of his time helping real estate investors and entrepreneurs get closer to the things that they want and keep more of the money that they make. Welcome in, David. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to keep spreading the message.
Yeah, man. So we always start this show off with a 6-word update. So what is your 6-word update today?
So I would say travel, speaking, family, growth all around. So those are my 6 words.
Love it. Tell us more about that.
I'm traveling a lot, speaking a lot because of the Profit First book that I wrote, Profit First for Real Estate Investing. I love spending time with family when I'm actually here in town with them, being very intentional with that. Then I feel like there's just been a lot of growth in all areas in the business, just as a family as well too, in the marriage relationship. I have a 6-year-old daughter who's a ton of fun to be around right now, and I love being with her. So just stuff like that, reading and growing and just always trying to get better. So it's what came to my mind first off for the 6-word update.
Love it. Yeah, that's a tough balance. I spent, before I got into real estate, and that's actually part of why I got into real estate, is because I was traveling to 2 cities a week for about 4 years. And then 4 years before that, it was 1 city a week. So it was like all I knew was travel. I was always on a plane. And I know a lot about trying to balance certain things like that, right? Growing your business, making sure you spend time with the people that you love, and allocating resources appropriately becomes very important when you're trying to do all these things, right?
Right. Yeah, it
Yeah, I mean,
does. It's a huge priority because it's like you've got 2 things that, like the man that said duties never conflict never did anything, right? And it's like you've got the one side that really does matter. Like if I had to drop everything, I would drop the travel and the speaking, like to save the relationship with my family. Thankfully, I've got a great wife and a great daughter who sat down and was intentional about talking to them about this stuff. Like I knew with the book launch and the end of 2021 that there would be speaking opportunities that, and last year was nuts. I think it was like 40 in-person, travel, speaking events, and then, a bunch of virtual ones, which are nice because I could do that right here from my office at home. But that's where just being very intentional of talking about this is what's going to happen. Are you okay with this? And then getting the buy-in, before it all happens, instead of like, I'm doing this for you, and for the family, where I was just at an event where a guy put it great, where a lot of people think, they say, oh, I'm doing it for you, and when you're really doing it to them. And it's like, yeah, it's not for them, it's to them. So it's just being very intentional, setting the expectations, and being okay if they're not okay with it. I mean, if you chose that person to be your life partner, if you've got a son or daughter or someone that's very special in your life, you got to make sure that they're going to be the ones when you're 60 years old that are going to be huddled around you, and like they're the ones that you want there. So I just keep that in mind, even as a 31-year-old guy, like, okay, what is really important? So yeah, it's definitely, it's not really even a balancing act. It's more of the, okay, is it okay to do this at this time? Or should I say no to a certain event because there's something going on? Like right after this, my daughter has dance. I'm going to go to her dance studio and like watch her dance there, and then come back at a little later and do a speaking, virtual speaking thing later tonight. But I want to make sure that she knows dad's there and dad cares, especially while he's in town.
I mean, every decision that we make theoretically has an infinite number of trade-offs,
Yeah,
right?
for
You
sure.
decide to get on that flight and fly somewhere. Well, there's theoretically an infinite number of things you could have been doing with that time. Same thing, vice versa, right? When you make time to go to your kids' sports and events and all these types of things, well, there's an infinite number of things you could be doing, outside of that. And entrepreneurs, I feel like are, faced with this trade-off constantly trying to evaluate, and I tell this story sometimes on the show of the entrepreneur who says, well, I want to make $10 million by the time I'm 40 so that I can spend, all of my time with my family. And then, of course, we make all these excuses the whole time. Well, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for you. But
Right.
then you get to 40 and yeah, maybe you make that $10 million, but your wife's divorcing you. Your kids haven't seen you in years. You're you're out of shape. You're overweight. You got a drinking problem, but we're going to make sure we get that $10 million.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It was never about the relationship with them. It was about the acquiring of that status, which it's like that's because people think they trick themselves into that thought process, and it's like, well, and at 40 years old, I'm gonna have what? How old am I right now? And how old is she? I'm gonna have a 16-year-old daughter. And it's like at 16, she's going to get ready to be going to college and out of the out of the house. Like I want to have a relationship, especially now at this age. Oh my gosh, like this is the best years I feel like right now where she still likes me, and still wants to play with me, wants me to come to these events, wants to wave at me while she's in front of her friends. It's like this is the time where it's, you know what, if I don't go to every event or if I don't do all this stuff, it's like that's okay. And like you said, I have to be okay with that trade-off. And honestly, in the long run, I don't think I'll look back and say, man, I wish I would have worked more. I'm gonna be like, man, I wish I would have gone to more of her type of stuff or been there more for her, if anything.
Yeah. And I'm curious to get your opinion. We have a phrase that we call a timer, and it's this acronym we use to define all of the different, well, there's probably more, but a lot of the currencies, quote, that we trade. So A stands for attention. I believe it's Larry Yatch who says that's the what does he say? The most valuable currency. I heard him say that at one of the events, right? You have time, you have impact or influence, on people. Of course, money, you have energy or effort that you have to put in. And then you have like relationships, right? And every time you trade one thing, you're getting either you have to trade one to get more of the other, right? And I found that little framework was really helpful to say, well, if I'm trading my time for this, what am I getting in return? Am I getting more relationships? Am I getting more money? How much effort do I have to put in to make the impact that I'm trying to make, right? And there's all these little trade-offs with all these different currencies that we have to consider. What's your thought on that?
Well, my thought immediately goes to let's go even a step higher than that. In order for that to all work, you need to make sure that your focus is in the right place. So I would say the attention is the most important currency. So it's like, what am I focusing on? Because if I'm focusing on what's really important to my life as a whole versus I just need the $10 million or I need this, these specific things, and this is what I'm willing to trade, it's more about why am I here? Like, why am I here on this earth? And what is the one goal that I'm going after? And like making sure that this is where I'm headed. So that way, all those things, as I make the trade-offs, you're okay with it. It's like, that's the biggest part that I think a lot of people just struggle in life is that they don't accept the choices that they're making because they have no goals or no destination that they're really trying to get to. So they don't enjoy the journey. Because the journey is like Alice in Wonderland, like when she's talking to the Cheshire Cat. Like, he's like, which way do you want to go? I don't really know. Well, then it doesn't matter which way you take. Like, you're going to get there anyway because you're not headed in any direction. It's like that's where we have to give that attention. But I like that framework, and I think it's almost like, can you lift yourself out of it a little bit, and even at the higher level of, what is that? Okay, that's a great framework, but how do I even need to set this up? Because it's going to be different for every single human being. Because my relationships and my, like that I've set are not going to be the exact same as anyone else's. Like my relationship with my wife is different, even though you might have a wife and a 6-year-old daughter. Like the same exact scenario, you don't have the same exact people. So those are going to be different for everyone. So it's like understanding how that framework works, but also the destination that you even want to get to before that, so you enjoy it while you're there. That's why, like, right now, I'm trying to enjoy everything, even the travel. Even though, like, I don't love travel, it's like I'm still trying to enjoy being there and helping people, and I like spreading the Profit First message and all that stuff. It's like I want to make sure I'm enjoying it there. So there's my thoughts on the A-timer.
Yeah. I mean, you have pretty much dedicated your life, I would say, at this point to helping people get that level of clarity. You're talking about zooming out. So what we call that in our community is the solvable problem. And the big, I would say a big cornerstone of the solvable problem is you've got to play your game. Nobody has the same situation, right? We all have, even if you, like you said, even if we had a wife and a 6-year-old daughter, well, our preferences are different. The currencies that we're willing to trade are different.
Mm-hmm.
So again, what we do is we call that the solvable problem. And I know that you spend, like I said, a lot of your time helping entrepreneurs get clarity on that first, because otherwise you're the Cheshire cat. And it really doesn't
Right.
matter which way you go. If you're just
Right.
optimizing for more, well, more is an endless direction. There's no direction to that. It's just like, it's just aimless. And so, but I want to hear more about your solvable problem and your what clarity looks like for you. Obviously, like I said, I know you help a ton of people get clarity on that, but what does your personal solvable problem look like?
Man, my personal solvable problem. It probably hit me last year when I was reading Crucial Conversations. It's a
Mm,
great book.
yeah.
And chapter 10 is all about retaking your pen. And what that stands for is like your pen is your your pen is your self-worth. When you're born, you're writing your story. You know, you're scribbling all over the place. My 6-year-old daughter has her pen grasped firmly in her hand. She knows her worth at this age. And like as she grows and as I grew into a teenager and junior high, high school, we let other people dictate how we feel and how we act and how we think, and then we give them our pen and they're writing our story and we feel crappy. And I feel like my solvable problem was I was a people pleaser for so long that I had to make sure that I took back my pen and honestly helped a lot of people with taking their solvable problem and getting to their solvable problem, just like you were saying, getting that clarity around what is it, and that knowing that I had the worth to be able to help people and that I could bring value to them and that I could help them walk through that, because we help a lot of people on the financial end of their business, like just get clarity around the finances and help them know exactly where they stand, because that's a lot of people's first domino to even get to their solvable problem. Because you could have all the good stuff in the world, but if you're thinking about money too much and obsessing about it, then everything else gets put by the wayside. You're thinking about, shoot, if you're a real estate investor, is that deal going to close? Am I going to be able to get that money in? If it doesn't close, where's payroll going to come from? It's like you just get the uptight shoulders. So that's where I had to work through a lot of my solvable problem was like, okay, I know that I have the worth to be able to go out there and teach, because I never thought, like, if you know me personally, I'm very much an introvert. I do not like being in crowds. The stage, like 5, 10 years ago, would have frightened me to death, and now I'm going out there speaking a ton because I know that I have this message, that the message is more important than how I feel. The message is going out there and making sure that, you know what, the worth that I can bring is this message, and I'm the bearer and bringing it, to this community, because I have the background in real estate and the financial world. So it's like I want to be able to do that. So I think for me, reading that book really like rang my core value bell last year of like, this is what I need to work on, that self-worth portion, and really making sure that I can also, if other people are struggling with that, knock down that domino as well too, to get to their solvable problem and have them clear that path to a much more fulfilled life. That's why now I try and to enjoy the stuff that's happening, on a day-to-day basis versus, like, okay, that 10 million, like, I love that you use that $10 million goal in the future. It's like, that's what everyone has. They have that. It's more, the more stuff, like more and more, where they don't really have not even just a concrete goal, but a goal that are you going to be happy with it along the way, even though you might lose the people in your life? So I think that was my solvable problem, to help other people get to their solvable problem as well too.
Mm. Yep, I had a feeling that was the case. And I'm a recovering people pleaser myself, right?
A lot of us
That's
are.
just I feel like it has a lot to do with our hardwiring as human beings, right? Like a lot of us are just hardwired towards that.
Yes.
Um,
And then throw in, okay, I'll bear it all. I have a Christian background. So everyone in a lot of churches, it's like, put everyone before yourself. That's what Jesus did. He was a servant leader. And it's like, yes, but at the same time, he went to the mountain to pray and got refueled himself too, and like still did the things to give you a balanced life. So it's like you shouldn't just always just think of others all the time and like totally neglect yourself and just live your life to please others as well. So that was a big thing for me. Even though faith is like the cornerstone of who I am as a person, there were some damaging things that came from it too as well. So I still am a person of faith. I still have my belief. I still have all of that. But then there's some things that just were put into me where I'm like, I have to take that out and be like, okay, it's okay for me to spend time with my family and not to be constantly thinking about the work or these other things, or like or going to help at church, or going to help over here and traveling and like that. It's like, it's okay to take those times to be that. That was something I had to work through. And
Yeah.
that's, that's through a background like that. And that could be for any type of background where maybe you had parents around money that said money doesn't grow on trees, or no, we can't afford that. They might have given you limiting beliefs like that, and it's like then you attach your worth to the money because they're like, no, we can't do this thing. It's like all this different hang-ups that we get from growing up that we don't get to work through until we see the light at some point, until we realize, you know what, maybe everything I learned it wasn't the greatest. And some people, it's very obvious with their backgrounds and like where they came from, and so they come through and they plow through it and they're able to get through it faster. And some people, it might be like, hey, I had a good life growing up, like I don't have a lot to work through. And that was honestly my case. I thought I had great parents. I thought this was gonna, like everything was good, and it's like I still had some things to work through. So it was my own ego in the way that I had to get past. And like the ego, which was stopping me from helping as many people as I could, and still had struggling with the self-worth as well too. It's just all those things catapulting, and snowballing into one giant thing where it's like, once I removed that, I felt like, that's why I said growth all around as part of the, the 6-word update, because it's been a journey of growing in so many different areas, because once you unlock that, I feel like you're able to grow and like spread those branches out a whole lot more, and help like you were intended to do by being put on this earth, like to help those yourself and the other people that you're around as well too.
Yeah. Well, I like a couple of things that you said. One is that we've got to define what success actually means.
Yeah.
That's what the solvable problem is, if you're just solving for, let's go see how much money I can make to infinity, right? Okay, well, if that's what you're solving for, you have no judgment, like no judgment. If that's what you want to do, no judgment here, but you have to recognize that there's trade-offs, first of all.
Right. Yeah.
And if that's what you're optimizing for, it might mean that your relationships are going to suffer. It might mean that your effort is also going to be maxed out. It might mean that you have no time to pursue anything else. If you're okay with all of these things, again, no judgment. It just starts with clarity. Get clear on what you're willing to trade, what you're not willing to trade. And then the second thing that you said that we sort of talked about is everyone that I've noticed that has had success in entrepreneurship or business in general has had this like moment of reckoning where they've now identified the biases that they carry, right? In our case, it's, we're people pleasers, and we have to sort of, instead of trying to maybe build a system or a business that assumes that that's not going to be the case, how about we now build a business or a system that accounts for the biases that we have that are oftentimes hardwired into the system? It's really hard to update your hardware, let's say, much, much, much easier to update your software.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's really good.
And so, when I think of, I guess I'm curious what you think of when you think of software, because that's what it is. Like, our hardwiring is, I don't know if you've ever read, I forget what the name of the book is, but Daniel Kahneman talks about system 1 versus system 2 brain. The system 1 brain is the fight or flight survival side of our brain, right? And it's this, it's a reactionary side of our brain, right? You're going to certain anxieties, you're going to feel certain things, right? But what we need to do is we need to move that decision making into the logical side of our brain. He calls system 2. And this idea that you can update your software, which is the system 2 brain, you can't really update your hardware. And part of the software is how I think of profit first, right? It's like defining the rules ahead of time, just like a computer has a software that it runs. The hardware is the wires and the metal and the plastic and the tubes and all these things, but it means nothing if it doesn't have a set of rules that it
Yeah.
follows, right? And that's again how I think of profit first. It's like, let's make this simple so that we have rules that have to be followed so that we don't let our hardware and our biases force us to just, money comes in, we spend a bunch of money, and then we have no idea how much we're keeping. Well, that's probably because you're facing a lot of biases
Yeah.
towards, well, I have to keep up with all these people. I want to make more money. And you think that more is going to solve your problem. So, anyways, what's your thoughts on the software and how you are using Profit First to sort of download that into people?
Well, and that's what I love about being a human, because once you get a system like that in place, your hardware can start to change too, or your hardware. And that's where it's
Exactly.
like, okay, if I can get the software inside where it's a simple system. That's what Profit First is. That's where a lot of people have heard the message of Profit First before, even if you've never read the book. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you've probably read or heard, out there, like, pay yourself first, or a portion of all I have is mine to keep, or like, like things like that. Those statements inside the books like Rich Dad Poor Dad or Richest Man in Babylon, like different books that are just appeal to the masses. And that's where a lot of people listen to those messages and say that sounds good, but there's no system, there is no software behind it, to be able to say, how do I actually do that? That's where I felt like Profit First filled that gap of, it's software that you can download into your brain, but it's also something that you can put inside of your business, and
Mm-hmm.
also your personal life as well too. It is
Yeah.
literally like the Dave Ramsey envelope method, like, but for business. It's giving every dollar a name that comes into your business, and it's putting banks instead of envelopes. So bank accounts set up with intentionality, with a purpose, with a name, so that way you can know where every dollar is going. Because like you said, a lot of people, when they come and they have a business, they think that more income solves every single issue. But then they get to six figures and they're like, oh, I'm making six figures. This is awesome. Then, then mid six figures, and they're like, okay, why isn't this getting any better? Like, we're at seven figures now. What the heck is happening? Like, why am I spending 1.1 million and making $1 million? Like, this
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. So that's where a lot of people, but you know why? It's because what we were talking about, it's their hardware is wired for, the bad habits that they have from either childhood or from a lack of education that we don't get anywhere in, especially at school or wherever, of financial literacy and financial education, of knowing where the dollar should go. Sure, you
Mm-hmm.
might learn how to write a check in school like back in the day, or you might learn about some of those types of things, but then you don't learn about, okay, a deal closes, what do I do with the money? Like,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest questions we get asked. It's like, okay, we just close this deal. What do we do with it? And that's where a lot of people have there's a lot of softwares out there, like how to do a deal and how to close the deal. And like, well, here we go. This is how, and I love those because a lot of people have taken that, and if they're hard workers, they put in the work and they do it step by step and they close the deals. But then that's where the training stops. That's where their software stops. And it's like, you need another set of software that's making the money, but you also need software for keeping the money too. And like
Yeah.
knowing where every dollar is going. That's where I feel like Profit First bridges that gap of, okay, especially in the real estate world, I'm going to have cash flow issues. Like, I know the property's not always going to close when the closing date is set. The buyer's going to go buy a truck the night before and screw up their credit, or like the wholesaler is going to back out, or like they really didn't have it under contract, or like the rental and the tenant and everything's blowing apart. So that's where stuff like that is just going to happen. But it happens in every business. Every business has their version of that. And that's
Exactly.
where I feel like Profit First comes in to say, here's software where even though you might have all these bad habits in the past, this is going to help you uncover those bad habits. And it's also going to give you a software to make sure that you don't have to shut down your
Yeah.
business or have to shut down completely. It's like giving you a simple system to track the money. But then what I love about this software is that it slowly changes the hardware too, of like, okay, now I understand why I need profitability and why I need to see it in a bank account versus just like one big bank account where everything goes in and out and I have no idea if that's my profit or if that's for the IRS or if that's to grow the company or if that's for payroll or taxes or whatever. So it's like, that's where having a simple system like that, I love the analogy of software and hardware there, because it's like, that's a software that you can implement that's pretty simple for the entrepreneur to be able to, because I'm a very simple person. So it's like, that's what appealed to me about it at the beginning as a real estate investor, was the simplicity of it. And then it helped me. it helped me personally with some of the bad hardware I had around money, around habits around money, around the thinking around, and the philosophies and the different thought patterns, like all that stuff. So that's where I love that analogy, because it is. You can implement a software like Profit First, and if you're not keeping the money that you want to be keeping, you can do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm an engineer, so I just think of it as like, if this happens, then do this.
Right. Yeah.
Else do this. Right.
Yeah.
And we need these rules. We have to have rules. Another thought that I had as you were sort of explaining that is, when I read Profit First, and I never got this education, right? I never had this level of education. It was never provided for me.
Exactly.
But when I read the book, I was like, oh, well, that all makes sense. It's not like it's not intuitive. It's fairly, I wouldn't even say, I would go as far as to say it's obvious in certain cases, right? It's fairly obvious we should be doing these things.
Duh.
Yeah.
Reading it's like, yeah, it makes sense.
But that's not the problem. The problem isn't that we don't need to be, there's a gap between action and intention. Right. So I get that you might understand these things. Paul, you probably understand these things. Okay, but how big is the gap between, I get it.
Yeah.
Between what you're actually doing on a daily basis. And again, that's just our hardware playing tricks on us. We're sitting here saying, oh yeah, I got that. That makes sense. That's so obvious. I'll probably just do it. But again, there's a big gap between, I get that you understand it. Your intention is probably to do these things, but are your actions actually in line with your intention? And that's how I think of what this does, is it just closes that gap between action and intention.
I would 100% agree, because most people, that's why I said at the beginning, most people have heard a message like this and it makes sense. Like, okay, I should pay myself first. I should make sure that I'm healthy, and like that the business is healthy, like that my for-profit business is actually profitable. Like that makes a lot of logical sense. But nobody puts that 2 and 2 together, because they're scared of the finances, because we've made it so many bookkeepers, CPAs, accountants have made it so nebulous and out there. Like, this is something that only we can do, and like you have to be this super smart book nerd, to be, a financial wizard. And it's like, well, okay, to do your job, but not to go in there and know where every dollar's going. I don't need to have that degree. I don't need to take those accounting courses. I just need to know where my money's going, and I could put a system like this in place, and it bridges that gap. And that's why I also like traveling and speaking, because it's like just bringing that message of hope. Like, you don't have to stay. If you're stuck in if you traded your W-2 paycheck to paycheck and you became a real estate investor, or an entrepreneur, and now you're living deal to deal or sale to sale, or month to month, it's like, that's where this, I feel like, helps people get out of that cycle of that deal to deal cycle, or that week to week, month to month, of like, let's get out of this and like know where those dollars are going. So it's definitely the intentionality and actually, like, this is where this creates a system that takes all those things we've heard from other books and makes them in practice. So I can pay myself and I can be profitable, instead of running an accidental non-profit business like a lot of people do.
Got to set rules. I have so many things. We probably should have done a 2-hour podcast. We don't have time for all that, but there's a couple things I want to throw at you.
Yeah.
One is something I call the high month paradigm. Oh, it's actually my business partner, Dan, calls it the high month paradigm. So it's this idea, right? You work with a lot of CG Select people, I'm sure, and CG Premier people. Yes, and there's this like ascension, as if, there's this natural like draw towards, well, you want to get to that next level. Yeah. Which is a function of comparison and all the things, right? We're not playing our game. We're comparing ourselves to other people, but that's a different conversation. But what happens is, this would happen to me, is I was a 6-figure business owner. And then we went out and we had a month where we hit 100K in a month. And it was like, ooh, boom. I guess I'm a 7-figure business owner now. At this run rate, I guess I must be a 7-figure business owner. So what I did is I sort of took on that identity and started making decisions as if I was a 7-figure business owner. And what happened was, all the money that came in just went right out the door. I didn't keep a dime of it, right? It was all in this in the interest of just growing. Why? Because other people had that level of a business. I don't really know why I wanted it. It's more like the kid who sees someone else another kid playing with their toy. And it was like, I wasn't even playing with that toy, but now all of a sudden I see they're playing with it and I want it. Right. So why do we struggle? Why do entrepreneurs struggle so much with this high watermark? And then now all of a sudden they've like acquired this identity that they so desire, and they do everything they can to adjust to that new identity, where really all you had was one good month, right? We don't really have the data to support that you're a 7-figure business owner, but your hardware is telling you that you are.
Yeah. So that analogy of the pen comes in here. So like someone else is holding their pen, their self-worth, and writing their story at that point. And so instead of the school kids, that in high school that you were like, okay, like what do I need to act like so I could be like them? It's just a different version of that. So now you're going to whatever mastermind. It's not even CG. It's like just you could be listening to Facebook, Instagram, like just the gurus out there that are spending millions and billions of dollars to pump in the message of like more and more and more hustle, hustle, hustle all the time. And it's like you're just going to always be comparing yourself to that next level. And once you like get a glimpse of it and taste like, boom, I'm there, then you make all the decisions based around that new level, and you're like, oh shoot, why am I not keeping as much? Or like, why didn't becoming this 7-figure business owner, why is it not chalked up to what I thought it would be? Like, why isn't it this? And then you're like, I didn't keep any money. Well, it's because we weren't ready for that. Or even if we were, we made decisions that we didn't have the clarity around to make decisions financially, or we didn't have the background, or we didn't have the education to make informed decisions. Because at 7 figures, it's not just about, okay, because if you think you're at that level and you think you're making decisions, if you've never attained that level or haven't had mentorship or haven't gone down that road, it's the same thing as just trying to swim if you've never swam before. Riding a bike, it's the same thing. There's still steps that have to be taken. Like you said, like there's rules that have to be attained to get there. So just because you hit it 1 month does not mean that you are now that person. I love how Keith Cunningham puts it in his books of like he wrote The Road Less Stupid and a couple others, and he says that if you try and scale cancer, the tumor grows. Yeah. That's what a lot of people do. They go out there and they have one great month and they're like, we are ready for scale. We can do this. I've seen the light. We can attain what these other people are doing. Let's go out and do it. And then they're literally scaling the bad habits that they haven't changed their hardware. They have still all those bad habits around money, around the decisions, about what they're doing. And then they're wondering, oh, shoot, I'm 7 figures now. I have attained that, but I'm literally spending more than what we're making. We did that in our real estate business. We were doing 25 deals a month at our highest point, but spending 26 worth of deals out the door. And like, that is ridiculous. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we busting our butt to do so many deals and still have that much money going out the door? And it's like, that's the types of things where that's why I'm so passionate about this now, because a lot of people get that syndrome of I'm arriving. Maybe I haven't arrived, but like I've hit that goal and now I feel like I could do that all the time. And then they start making decisions they're not ready to make yet because they don't have the proper software installed, which is such a great analogy of like, we have to have certain softwares before we're to that next level of that more advanced technology, of like where we can go, because the people that are doing in 7 and 8 figures are not smarter usually than the people doing 6 figures. They just have better software that is running. Like they went out and either found the right connections or the right people or the right process, or they failed. Maybe they're a little bit more, they're wiser and they've had more experience to say, oh my gosh, none of this worked, but this does. And I just keep doing that over and over again until, I get to that level. So it's like, that's another, just broad swath there of all that. But that's why I think a lot of people that get to that level and like think they're going to sustain that level, and then they don't because they don't have the proper softwares installed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another thought that I had is, about in reference to this solvable problem, we get into business ideally to solve some problem in our life, right? We're trying to, a lot of us say this term financial freedom, right? We want whatever that means, and I have defined my solvable problem as not like, I don't want to work anymore. It's like, I want to get my business to a place where I like to say that I can play business as a sport, the same way I go play pickup basketball. which means I don't have to play. I play because I want to play. When I'm in the game, I'm playing to win for sure. But when I step off the court, whether I won or lost that game has really no bearing on my mental state because I just like to play. And so when I think about like other people that I hear, they say, I want financial freedom and all this sort of stuff. It's like, okay, so instead of growing your business, because we all have margins in our business, right? Let's say you're operating on a 30% margin inside your real estate business and you're making, let's say $50,000 a month. And maybe you're putting $15,000 in your pocket every single month. And you need to get to, let's say, $30,000 a month to live the life that you want to live.
Yeah.
Well, part of what occurred to me going through all this process, updating my software, is that it's actually a lot easier to recapture wasted resources than it is to double your business, right? Actually, just keep more of the money that you're already making. Right. How do we just do that? Because in order to keep more money, it's a lot easier than because you're operating at, let's say, a 30% margin. So you have to sell $50,000 more to actually put $15,000 in your pocket. Wouldn't it be easier to just save money, increase your margins? That's kind of how I looked at it. And what I realized was like, I was actually already at my solvable problem. I was just wasting money left and right. I was treating the money in my personal bank account, mental accounting bias, right? Treating this money differently than this money. I had no problem just lighting money on fire in my business.
Yeah.
But like in my personal life, it was like, no. All I need is another $10,000 a month and I'm there. And it was like, well, Paul, then just stop spending $10,000 over here and put it in your pocket.
Yeah.
Crazy how that works, right?
It is crazy how that works once you realize that it's possible too. That's why I feel like a lot of people don't think that's possible. Like, oh man, like I have to spend this money to get it back in and all this stuff. And they just don't realize where every dollar is going. That they don't take that inventory and they don't know what's really going out the door and what really is returning them an actual dollars back into the business versus, oh shoot, like why am I spending this money again? Like what is it actually getting me versus what my big overarching goal is or that solvable problem is for me.
Well, and it's the curse of the quote visionary / salesperson, right? And I'm a career salesperson. That's all I was ever have been. And that's what I was put on this earth to do.
Yeah.
And so what does the hardware say to a salesperson? Forget about collecting and analyzing the data. I'm just going to go sell another deal and then our problems will be solved. The answer is more. When really what it should be is how do I get closer to the things that I want without having to chase more and more and more constantly?
Yeah. And that's where like the first client, one of the very first clients I've worked with, where he told me in 2019 he did more deals than he's ever done, but lost more money than he's ever lost.
Yeah.
Tracing more deals versus the next year where he did the least amount of deals that he's ever done. Like he did 5 flips the next year versus trying to do 2 to 3 a month. And he said, now I have more money at the end of this year because he combated his hardware of being that salesperson and said, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I'm intentional with every dollar that comes into my business and put it to where he's like, where was this money going before? Like I have less to work with, but I have more available. Yeah. What? It was like, to him, it was a little bit baffling. And then it's like, yeah, that's the difference in just going out there and grinding and hustling and doing that versus becoming better. A better business, a well-rounded business owner who not only knows how to sell, but also knows how to keep it and knows how to put the dollars to the best use.
Yep. So stop optimizing for more, start optimizing for closer, the things that you want in life, however you define success. No judgment, but like, let's stop chasing more and let's get closer to the things that we actually want because that's a target that can be hit. More is an arbitrary, endless, infinite, you're just going to be forever chasing yourself. So that's sort of how I see it. And that's why I resonate so well with your message and in Profit First. And David, let's finish by leaving our listeners with your greatest lesson learned in business. It could be your greatest lesson you've learned recently or throughout your career, but what's something you'd like to leave the listeners with?
We've already touched on it and danced around it and courted it. It was one of my mentors when I started my business, Simple CFO, said, "You've got a young family. You're going to have to make those trade-offs. Like you don't have to make as much as you think. Like you need to spend the time with your family. Like what is important to you? Like to really sit down and think about that, which I know we've talked about a lot today. But that was probably the greatest lesson I learned, and I think about that constantly. Whenever I get a speaking opportunity, that conversation runs through my head. Of like, should I take this? Let me go talk to my wife first. Like, let's make sure we're planning this before just saying yes, jumping at every opportunity. So just really get clear on that. Once you're clear on that, because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard because there might be a fog around like what really is important to you. Maybe yeah, you have a family, but you don't have to face the travel schedule or whatever, but it might be the business, it might be the different things that are going on around you. It's so that might be it, is that conversation that he had with me randomly, because he's like, I travel a lot now, but I'm older, my kids are grown, like they're out of the house, so I can do this stuff. So just be intentional with your time. So that was probably one of the greatest lessons I learned that's carried me through the last years here that I've had this business.
That's so good. And also give yourself permission to change your mind, right?
Yeah,
Because things are going to change. And oftentimes we get so attached to like, yeah, but I said this is what I wanted. And it's like, well, new data has presented itself.
Exactly.
Like, yep,
Because I'm not going to relive the same year over and over and over again until I die.
Right.
It's like stuff is going to change, stuff is going to happen, and I need to be adaptable to that environment as well too, and make sure that those things are updated. Like at 6 years old, I'm not going to be, like that's going to be a lot different when she's 16, even though her attitude will probably be the same. But like, then when she's 16, it'll be different circumstances, different things going on in her life. God bless it. It'll probably be boys and stuff like that at 16 versus like the stuff that she's coming home with now and like learning to read, and learning to do the stuff that she's doing now. So that's very true. Give yourself permission to change.
What an awesome conversation, David. Thank you so much for joining me. If people want to get to know a little bit more about Simple CFO, Profit First, what's the best way to get a hold of you, and what's the best way to find more information on that?
Yeah, simplecfo.com. That is the one-stop shop, so make it as simple as possible. So simplecfo.com, that's where we have the link to the book and a link to all of our stuff, podcast, and we also have the link to schedule a call with our team if you're interested in what we're doing, implementing the Profit First system. Then the other thing is the Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm posting on there and stuff. If you just want more info on Profit First, or just seeing what all is going on that side and wanting to learn more about keeping more of the money you're making. So there you go.
Love it. Well, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. And for everyone who's listening, lastly, we encourage you to adopt the investor frame. So knowing what you know now in the conversation that David and I just had, what changes do you need to make to your software, to your life, to your businesses, so that you can get closer to the things that you want without chasing more and more? Thank you, David. It's been such a pleasure. For everybody else, we'll see you guys on the next episode.